So welcome everybody to Slow Money Maine's first ever virtual gathering, not our preference in our very social centric world of Slow Money Maine, but we realized that we had to model the resilience and adaptability of our wonderful food businesses who responded to this pandemic in very creative, strong, pivotal ways. And we found some creative options for a couple of weeks, and then we found ourselves feeling that we had to put ourselves on hold because all our gatherings were canceled for the next indefinite period of time. And we had no real sense of identity or purpose with our work, which is not the usual case. So we decided that it was time to jump into the virtual world and hold this gathering, which would have been in March in Gardiner, as a follow-up to the first conversation that we had at a gathering in November. And we only had an hour before our regular Slow Money Maine gathering at that point to launch into this conversation. And obviously, change, and everybody wanted more. So here we go, giving you more. For those of you, I'm not going to take time to get a show of hands, but for those of you that are new to Slow Money Maine, just a quick reminder that we have been a network of inclusive and diverse participants since 2010, focused on building a local healthy food system and vibrant communities. And we have been very focused on the relationships and partnerships that we have created to catalyze more than $15 million into Maine's food economy in that time through loans, grants, and equity, along with technical assistance as needed. And again, these have been connections through us. We are not a solid entity that offers funding and technical assistance, but we connect people to meet their needs. And we have been doing that with a mix of results for 10 years in using some very pioneering strategies. And we have met with the successes and failures that come with pioneering strategies. So we're going to share some of those perspectives gained through our experience. But before we start, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping in Zoom world and ask that everyone as a participant take no more than 2 minutes to speak each time you speak. You can certainly speak many times because we're trying to keep this as conversational as we can in this somewhat awkward structure to do that. But we want to hear from a lot of different people. And each time you speak, you will be unmuted by Kari. We're going to invite you and urge you to stay muted when you're not speaking so that we don't get to have too much in-depth experience of your personal lives, which has been an interesting piece of this time, but not our focus today. We do have a few guests that are investors and businesses that related to this theme. We have permitted them to have up to 5 minutes each when they speak because we've asked them to come with some presenting information. So the first time you speak, it would help if you just state your name and your affiliation, whatever way that is meaningful to you, related to the local food movement. We're going to determine as we go through this time together if we want to end the session with breakout rooms so that all of you can have a chance to share the inspiring offerings of the time together and chat about next steps that may be there for you. We'd love to get your feedback on how this works for you. We've never done it before. We're happy to be trying it out and it will likely come with the glitches that come with new things. And we really look forward to you letting us know how it goes for you so that we can determine the future of these focus groups that we would like to continue while we have this Zoom experience. And if you have comments that you would like to share, please send them along to Kari, my administrative assistant, who is helping with all the technical details of this session. Our email address is info@slowmoneymaine.org. I guess the last thing is, if you're having issues of any sort, of a technical sort, please use the chat option to connect with Kari directly during the session, and she'll do her best to help you out. Anything else before we jump in, Kari, that I've missed?
I just wanted to correct one thing, which is I think we decided that to keep it really casual, we would let people unmute themselves when they wanted to speak. That just feels so much more simple. So when we get to the conversational moments, if you have something you want to share, just unmute yourself. And if two people start to jump in at the same time, we're not such a big group that I don't think we can figure it out. So let's try it that way before resorting to the raise hand function. So, okay.
I just want to share my delight that you're all here, because it really, I feel almost teary about this, because it gives me a sense of connection that I have sorely missed without the social aspect of our work. And I'm really glad you're here. So we're going to start with Eleanor Kennedy, who has been a member of the steering committee of Slow Money Maine and an investor and mentor of many sorts that she will give some hints of, to give her perspectives of why it's important to be investing in a local food economy in Maine.
Is that my cue to unmute? Hi, everyone. Great to see you. I hope my internet connection stays up with this. Can you all hear me? Okay, good, because I'm still seeing Bonnie. So I've been part of the Slow Money Network since the beginning in Maine. And it's been a little bit of a roller coaster ride, but a really wonderful ride overall. And I just, I'm the type of person who dives in. So I feel like I've gotten fairly deeply involved with some of my investments, which has felt really good. And I've definitely had some losses, but there have also been some wins. And even some of the losses where it might have been a financial loss, if I've written off a loan, if it's helped the company succeed, to me, it's still a win. So I really, you know, it's been so heartening, because I see, because of the relational aspect, I have relationships with the companies I've invested in. That's, for me, it's very much about the people. And that's really created, those relationships have built the trust that have allowed for repeat investment and for really getting engaged with the businesses. And seeing them kind of up close then gave me the courage to start my own business, which is a sort of weird loop in all this, where I now have opened up a farm-to-table restaurant in Damariscotta. Of course, this is not the time to have a startup restaurant, but that's a whole nother story. But we were just profiled in Down East in May, so you can check it out. But one of the joys of having a farm-to-table restaurant is that I'm sourcing from at least 5 companies, 5 farms and food producers and businesses that I have invested in over the years. So again, it's just another layer of involvement and engagement. And both, you know, Crown of Maine and Maine Grains are companies where I've been an investor and where we have served food from them in my restaurant. I wanted to highlight, since Crown and Maine Grains are both represented here, I wanted to highlight one investment in Commonwealth Poultry. I've been deeply engaged with this poultry processing company in Gardiner, Maine, since they moved out of a barn. And they've been through several growth phases, and it's been such a success on many fronts. I mean, first of all, Ryan you've all probably read about what's happened with Tyson Food down in Portland, not to mention all across the country. But Ryan is one of the larger employers of Somali Bantu workers in Maine who live in Lewiston, and he values the health and safety and well-being of his employees so much, and nobody's gotten sick. And the business has been booming throughout this period. And I feel like so much of that is because of the relationship and respect that he has for his workers. And when Ryan started out, I and several others made fairly small loans. And over time, I just built that relationship and got more deeply involved, where he was sending me his financials every month and we were talking all the time. And I became basically his line of credit because, again, he was too risky for the banks. And for me, one of the big successes is when he was able to grow his sales and grow his business to the point that then, a bank became his line of credit. And he was able to graduate in that way while still needing support. I mean, there were still additional loans that I did and loan guarantees. That was a really frustrating piece to me, where you had a business that was successful, that was actually profitable, and still he couldn't get an equipment loan. He needed to buy a $140,000 piece of equipment. And the process was so slow and so difficult that I ended up fronting the money to him. And then I had to, when he got the bank to do a loan, I had to guarantee it with $300,000 put aside in a separate fund. And I guess I'm just raising this to show you that there are still huge capital issues for these businesses. And it wasn't until he reached a whole new level of sales with this pandemic, actually, that he was able to consolidate his debt and get it backed by the FSA. And now he's paid back all his loans to me. My guarantee has been released. Ryan's sales have doubled, from this month this year to from this month last year. And he's now owning his facility. I mean, he's a huge success story, and yet he's had incredible obstacles, both on the financial end and with difficult inspectors, all sorts of things, but he has persevered. And I love telling his story because it's just heartening to me how people can succeed and how we can support them and help them in that trajectory until they graduate to where they don't need us as much anymore, which is the best thing. So, though the relationship will always, we still talk all the time and it's, anyway, I just wanted to tell that story.
Thanks so much. Let's imagine this conversation happening in a living room setting at the church in Gardiner. So I'm going to open it up for questions and comments for anyone in the room.
Eleanor, can you give us just a sense of in very rough numbers, those sort of sales plateaus that he had to reach to graduate through those? Because when you say like a $140,000 loan for people, that is a large loan. And so I think when people start out on a food business journey, sometimes they envision like just enough for me and my partner to make a living. And I think one of the root surprises of a lot of this work has been just how big your business needs to grow as a food business to break even and make money. And that's been a challenging part of the journey. So I wondered if you could share that just to give people who aren't familiar with food processing. We hear about Tyson Foods and they're gigantic, but tell us a little more about those bracket levels for not his literal numbers, but rough numbers.
Well, the first equipment loan, just to give you a sense of scale, the first equipment loan I did for him was a $12,000 loan. So that was a smaller piece of equipment. And I can't remember kind of what sales he was at then, but at the time of that bigger loan and that whole negotiation, he was around $2 million in sales. And showing a profit. He was paying himself and showing a small profit. And so it was frustrating to me, the runaround that he got going to several banks. And then the fact, I mean, he might have gotten a loan in the end, but by guaranteeing it, I was also able to assure that he got the lowest rate. So that was part of my motivation as well. And I have found as an investor, this is not the first guarantee that I've done. I've had one with Crown. And I love it as a way of supporting businesses where you don't necessarily have to move your funds, but you can support businesses by having them access the capital that they need at better rates.
I have a question. Eleanor, did you find that the entrepreneur needed any other business assistance? I'm just wondering what other resources are necessary other than the capital, of course, for them to be successful.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'd say maybe 3 to 4 years ago, I suggested to Ryan that he bring on Jed Beach, who was doing a lot of business planning work with farms, and Jed basically took over the QuickBooks and a lot of the accounting work, which was really helpful for his growth process. And Jed worked with him for several years. And then Ryan got him, through our networks and through connections with CEI and the Maine Center for Entrepreneurs. He's done 2 entrepreneur programs, both of which actually came with TA funds that he was able to utilize. And he's accessed, again, with support from our network, Fair Food Network grants. And Slow Money Maine TA grants. So all those grants helped to pay for the technical assistance, which when he started out, he was not able to afford. And there have been a whole number of businesses in our network that we've helped get grants for that kind of TA work, which has been so essential. I mean, the whole model of TA paired with capital is kind of how we functioned. Great question. And then he went and in the entrepreneurship program, he worked with a company, Bonnie, what's Bill Eldridge's? Opus Consulting.
Right.
And he worked with them and liked that experience so much that he then did a contract with them where he paid them for the next round of work. So it's been this whole process of maturing.
Questions, comments for those of you that came in a little bit late? We're having you unmute yourself when you want to speak.
I'll just give a cheerleading kind of comment. It's really delicious chicken, very low water, a lot of meat on the bone. Now, could you talk a little about the packaging? Because I know both you and Bonnie mentioned that you're really proud of the packaging. Comes in very compact, with really well packaged. But is even the plastic compostable? Because
I don't think the plastic is.
Okay.
So the reference here, so Ryan, one of the big pivots he did with COVID is go to online chicken sales. And so one of the first things I did was order just to see what the experience, even though I have my own chickens in the freezer. And I wouldn't have ordered if we hadn't had a conversation about packaging. And I understood that so the actual chicken is vacuum sealed in plastic. I mean, that's pretty much how you buy meat. But when he mails out, and I have another box coming this week, when he mails it out, it's in entirely recycled and recyclable paper packaging. And the insulation is all this paper cell stuff. So he found through Package, a group in Portland, he found an eco insulation product. And so it just makes you feel so much better about, and it arrived, everything was completely cold. It was one cold pack, all the chicken. It was so impressive. And he's, his online sales, within a couple weeks of starting it, he was doing $1,000 to $2,000 a day in online chicken, in addition to other accounts. And of course he lost some accounts because of restaurants and universities and other things. And And I'd actually been serving Tide Mill organic chicken in my restaurant. Much as I love Ryan, I was looking for the organic product. And Tide Mill hasn't been able to get me chicken because their sales are through the roof. So I ended up buying Ryan's chicken, but also obviously feeling super good about that. So yeah, packaging is important.
This is Larry Dansinger. I have a question. It seems that if you hadn't been available with financial support, I'm not sure if this business would have succeeded as well as it has. And I'm wondering if there's a better system than trying to have somebody, back a small business dealing with a bank loan where the banks are so skittish. And I just don't, it just seems like a bunch of lucky breaks to enable that business to do as well as it has. Is there a better system out there? Is there state money that should be available? Is there CEI money that should be available? What's a better way that doesn't require a bunch of luck or as much luck as happened in this situation?
So that's a complex question with long answers that a lot of us would need to input on. I'll just give a quick thing, and then I think this is a perfect point for other people to be diving here because there are a lot of people in this group with experience here. I'd say that there have been some changes over the last 10 years in terms of more funds and capital available. I wouldn't say that it's enough. One new institution in play is the Maine Harvest Credit Union, which is now can do mortgages and working capital. So something like the equipment loan is something that he could have gone there for. So that's brand new on the scene. And that's going to be highly beneficial. I mean, there are people on this call who have funds who do investment in companies. So I think there are other resources, but we haven't solved this problem yet. It's a work in progress, but I'm gonna be quiet and let other people step into this space.
My name is Tori Jackson. I work for Maine Cooperative Extension. I do a lot of business support for farmers and a lot of new and beginning farmer training. I think given the timeline, it would not have happened any other way. I actually worked with the same business years ago trying to find some alternative funding, including grants or state support or something else. And the requirements are difficult, even for a profitable business to qualify for these programs. I do think we're in a better place than we were a few years ago. There are some more options. There are more understanding lenders, people who get agriculture now, which is great. But I still see a huge need for alternative models like this to be able to help successful businesses and potentially very profitable businesses get over that hump. There's definitely still a gap there.
I don't know if this is the right moment to bring this up, but I think, Bonnie, one of the framing questions that you gave to us was just to try to draw out why people do invest and why people don't invest. And one source of success and also chagrin and also massive uncertainty for me at times has been people both invest and don't invest because of whether they believe in the entrepreneur themselves and whether they and a whole lot of other factors. I don't want to say it's only personality or only confidence and personal relationships. So that is a powerful part of investing, is the confidence that the investor has in sometimes the people, the management team, or the individual, depending on how the business is structured. And that is like both one of the most joyous and wonderful things about this work. but it does have a darker side because sometimes winners and losers get picked on personality. And I've seen that quite a few times. And I've also had some pleasant surprises over the years of folks I met a long time ago that first couple go arounds, I would never have luckily I didn't, wasn't in the investor position, but as a business doing business with other individuals, sometimes you're like, that is never going to work. And then 10 years later, you're totally wrong. And I take some like pride in being wrong, because I think that there is a wide variety of personality traits and perspectives on business and ways to go about your work in the world that can be successful. But it does seem that a heavy weight in investing does come down to a personal relationship with the founder or the management team or the entrepreneur. And I think that can be a good thing and a bad thing, but definitely it's something we all need to keep in mind and be welcoming and accommodating to in this work. And it's not easy to do because I think we bring a lot of our societal or cultural or upbringing or a lot of our financial perspectives all get bundled into this unconscious assessment of the entrepreneur. So that's something that I've noticed, that people invest in people, and that at times has worked to my credit. I've had people invest simply because they literally write the check and say, yes, I like that you have a business plan. Yes, I trust that you've really put the time in to study and know what you do, but I'm investing in you. And that is a verbatim quote. And you can't believe the amount of honor, but also terror that statement induces, especially for me, because I do put a lot of my effort and time into crafting a talented team and invest resources, real dollars, in making sure that my team is stronger than I am. So it's not an invalid reason to invest. I think it's a perfectly valid reason to invest as part of the bigger picture. But I think we do want to be careful to make sure that that sort of assessing process doesn't leave opportunity off the table because we were too narrow in what we think success could look like or act like or be like. And I think it's a little bit trite to say well, as a woman entrepreneur, but I am aware that that's a real issue, that capital does not go to women because of simply the fact of them being women. And I think that's definitely something that is a real force out there in the world. I don't think. I guess I wouldn't know if I've experienced that because they would have said they wouldn't invest, but I definitely haven't encountered that firsthand. But I have encountered that sort of the why people don't invest. I have encountered that sort of lack of confidence in me as a business person directly before, and I think I've successfully overcome it sometimes, but not every time. And I think it was perfectly warranted in some circumstances where people chose not to invest in one of my businesses because they felt I wasn't ready for the investment as a business person and in my growth and development. And I in retrospect, I perhaps agree with them. Of course, that's not how I viewed it at the time. So I think that's the bank system has a lot of traipsings that try to neutralize some of that, but it does create a lot of, there's a lot of steps you have to go through to access the capital. So anyway, I wanted to draw that out and maybe open that up for a conversation. I don't know if that's what you wanted me to do, Bonnie, but.
Sure, free form as usual. Comments, questions? Jump in anytime.
I think Marada brings up a lot of really good points. And I think one thing we have not done well, or I think we as an investment community has not done well, is really quantified and appreciated some of the non-financial returns or bonuses of making some of these investments. I think many of us, and I'll speak for myself, having been in investments for a long time, it's really easy for us to converse in financial return numbers because everybody understands it and you can point to a number on a page and you can compare things really easily. It's a lot harder to compare the impact of, say, what your business is having, Marada, or Commonwealth Poultry, or any, you know, of the businesses that are supported by Slow Money Maine, compared to, you know, what an investment somewhere else might be doing, and that, whether it's harm or good. So I think that's one area that we kind of need to grapple with a lot more, is how do we actually, you know, and I know, Marada, you think about this. I mean, absolutely, in terms of supporting the farmers in your co-op. That's a huge impact that you're having on the Maine food economy. I don't think we as investors do a good enough job of evaluating that and really comparing that to other investments that are potentially out there.
Could you just let people that may not know you know what your connections
Yeah,
are
sure.
with these?
Sure.
Thank you.
Lisa Sebesta, and I was a co-founder with a fund called Fresh Source Capital Fund, and we raised about $5.5 million to invest in a number of food and ag businesses around New England. And so I understand that sort of the limitations of funds. You know, they have their pluses and minuses, and it's certainly one answer. It's definitely not the only answer to making investments. And now I am doing some consulting to some individual foundations on their investments.
Thanks, Lisa.
It's quite a crowd, so I'm speaking up here. My name's Bobby Lamont. I know a bunch of you from totally different ways, so it's really fun to have this group come together. I've been a member of Maine Angels for less than a year now, but one of the things I'm a former science teacher, and I really love I love technology related pitches. So I was at an event at Clean Tech Open. It was an MIT incubator. These old hand venture capital guys are there telling these young entrepreneurs what they need to know. And I almost fell out of my chair because he said, you know, we get so many things that cross our desk. I'm going to tell you, the first thing I look at is, who is this referred by? And it better be someone who you know really well. And I took it grated at me because I said, that is the old boys club right there. It's who you know. And then I digested it and said, okay, if it is who you know, then maybe my little tiny role in this ecosystem up here in Maine, where it's so friendly and collaborative, is I can help bring in to the table more people that aren't just white men. It's a lot easier to find women than non-white people, as you all know. But anyway, that's become a thing for me. So this is just going to what Marada was said. It absolutely that resonated with me, that to fight again, to understand that we all have our biases. We can't get rid of our biases, but we can educate ourselves, and we can work around them.
Thanks, Bobby.
I just want to say that I think, and Sandy River Charitable Foundation is part of the investment in Marada's. But I think the other thing is, investors, unless we're going to go the Eleanor route, which I've done Eleanor's route too, unless we're going to go the Eleanor route where you literally keep the company going, part of your job is to find like-minded investors. Like, who are your partners? If you as the investor are not going to be the hero, which is expensive and highly risky, then you need to make sure that all the other investors are like partners in keeping this company going and making it a success. And that the entrepreneur is also willing to listen to the investors, because a lot of times the entrepreneur doesn't have all the answers either. And so what you're really trying to do is find a team that will make it work. And in Marada's case, the team that eventually came together, it took a long time, an incredible amount of work on Marada's part and Lindsay's part, I think, is an amazing team. And the company has a much better success than if investors had just sort of wandered in, because in the end, a group got together and put money in and worked it all out. So like everybody got covered, everybody was equal, and jointly worked out terms. And I think that ideally that's the best way to go.
One more for this round, and I'd like to include some others that were asked to be part of this in presenting. So one more question or comment?
Yeah, this is Mary O'Brien from Brunswick. I'm involved with the Brunswick Area Interfaith Council. Marada, could you just briefly give us an overview of what, I'm not familiar with the Crown of Maine Distribution Company, just briefly what it is, and then how your finances worked over time. We just heard a discussion about getting a group of investors together, but just a brief.
sort of skipped over the meat of the matter. My apologies. Shouldn't have made that assumption. So Crown of Maine is a distribution company. So we drive trucks around and we pick up product and we deliver it to wholesale customers in Maine, Massachusetts, and a little bit in New Hampshire. Been doing it for a while. My parents started it back in 1995 off the farm, and then I took it over in 2008. We were a worker co-op from 2008 to 2019, and we just transitioned to a B Corp as part of a capital raise effort to raise over $1 million worth of capital. And that effort took many years and a couple of different formats and lots of help along the way. We did Class B shares as a co-op, which is a totally interesting model. If anyone's interested in that, just the fact that we are not a co-op anymore does not mean that I have no interest in co-ops or don't think that that model can work. I do actually think it can work. I'd love to talk to people about it. But we were able to, with a lot of help, draw together a group of investors, many of whom had Slow Money Maine connections, all of whom had Slow Money Maine connections. And it did take a lot of work, actual work on the actual capital campaign and raise and structure itself to get it to closing. So that's something that I needed help with, and I was provided with help for that through Slow Money Maine and the investor group themselves, who did a lot of work. And I don't want to gloss over the fact that all the way to the $1 million capital raise, we had every form of support that Slow Money Maine and the Maine food community and the workers of the worker co-op and my family. We had every form of support that we could possibly have, and we needed every ounce of it to survive. So that's the short version, and there's so much more that I could share, but it did take everything available. And like Ryan's story, I would share that the pandemic has doubled our sales, and that we are operating in the black during a time of year we never expected to be. Kathy doesn't know this yet. Hey, Kathy, happy to report. And there are definitely some positive things coming from this sort of redirecting of consumer behavior to the table. But I would say the reason we are operating in the black comes from a lot of work that we were given help with and efforts we put in to make sure that we could scale profitably. And without that work being done over 18 months, we would just be kind of screaming in pain through this growth, which I've done that model before too, and suffered the consequences. So yeah, every form of support was needed. That's the short version.
I just want to comment that Marada put an amazing amount of work in, but I think the other key thing was that the investors were also highly flexible. So even though we had a date when the money was supposed to go in, when everything didn't get lined up, guess what? We just tossed money in. Like, how much money does the company need to stay going? Well, we put it in pending documents and everything being lined up. So I think there was an incredible amount of flexibility on all sides and an amazing amount of work by Marada and her team, because those guys put in staggering amounts of work, and the investors, because we trusted them and really believed in what they were doing, then said, well, we're not quite there yet, but you need another 50 grand. And we all shelled out some money so that the company would keep going. And then in the end, you know, the lawyers make it all come out as if we just put it all in at once, meaning it's kind of like, oh, well, we'll just put the money in now and it's all going to work out sooner or later. And
there was one,
Marada, just for the record, Nate is on the call too.
Hey, Nate. There was one really scary moment where we had to like have a certain amount of money in escrow so we could break escrow and get the money. And because they'd given us the money, we weren't there yet. So that was, for those of you that like capital deals and how they come together, that's an adventurous tale of make sure your break escrow amount is lower than your advanced loan threshold. So, but it did all work in the end, and it did take everybody's cooperation, which I think is something that we value at Crown of Maine. And I think Kathy's right that finding a team of investors that really valued that cooperation was critical. I don't think it would have happened otherwise.
I was just going to say, as I'm one of the investors in Crown of Maine, that I came to it a little bit differently. But I have always been a member of a co-op, and we formed a co-op on North Haven in 2000 when I was here for a couple of years. And at that point, we were using UNFI and Associated Buyers, I think is the other one that we were using. And all of a sudden, UNFI, you know, stopped having any organic food, and it was really not, you know, what we were looking for. And we discovered Crown of Maine, I think probably in 2002, maybe something like that. And so we kept this co-op going, and Marada came out to North Haven and met with us. I don't remember the year, it was long ago. But you know, I think that there's another element in the kind of stick-to-itiveness and long-term commitment to that kind of business model that I think helps develop investors who want to stick with it. So, I mean, that's, you know, one reason why I did with this particular investment. I can say more about, you know, why I am interested in investing in this realm, but I just wanted to add that to this discussion.
Thanks, Becky.
Okay, I'm going to move on to another investor who came into Slow Money Maine Investments in a different way. So June Sleeper, would you share your history?
Sure. So I'm June Sleeper, and I kind of fell into the world of slow money and no small potatoes several years ago. I was looking for a different form of investment rather than just being involved in traditional stocks and bonds. And I found no small potatoes through internet searches and started attending Slow Money Maine meetings, only to, you know, really have my eyes open to how important supporting the local food economy is. And I've done that in a number of different ways, and I'm still involved. I became a member of No Small Potatoes. Eleanor and Lindsay are instrumental in bringing me into that. So I'm really grateful for that. It's been a wonderful experience. I've gotten to meet farmers and processors and a whole host of other people that are part of the supply chain. Because of that relationship, I've also been involved in projects. I've taken my background in logistics and supply chain management and worked on a number of efficiency projects directly with CSA. I've also, and that was funded by the Fair Food Network, so there was some assistance there as far as getting my, my background up front with those folks. I've also worked on LFPP grants on the logistics and value chain side. I've been working with MFT on a yearly basis as part of a grant review committee as well. So that's like the working world part of it for me, but I also am involved in making bridge loans and just being involved in the ecosystem as it is. I think it's super important, especially today with all this craziness we're all living with. And I think it really highlights the importance of everybody being supportive of a local food system and not having to rely on the Midwest or any place else for that matter to bring in the food that we need on our tables. So I find that to be rewarding because I come from a farming background, not personally, but in my family, and I mean, kind of take for granted all the work that was done. But today it's just even more clear how important it is to be locally minded, whether it's going to a farmer's market or supporting a local business like Eleanor and so many of the people have done that are on this call. I'm looking forward to going forward with it. I think that we have an opportunity as a whole right now because there's such a focus on where our food is coming from, and being involved with a lot of the small farms that have had to pivot and become e-commerce pros to get through this and keep themselves going has been just amazing to see the fortitude that they have and the energy and the commitment. And so I think we're all really fortunate to be in this ecosystem together. And I'm thanking Slow Money Maine for bringing me here today as well, because it's great to see everybody's face. As Bonnie says, it's been a while. So this is a really nice venue.
Thanks, June. Comments, questions?
I have a comment just as someone who watched June come into No Small Potatoes. It was wonderful to have someone come in too with real expertise, so that, I mean, she came in as an investor, but as a mentor really right off the bat. So it's been great to have her help a variety of companies in that way. So again, it's just part of the team building. And I just want to refer back to Kathy's comment, because even though I was a little bit of a cowgirl with Commonwealth Poultry in general, I've been working in collaborations on all my other investments, and that's definitely the part that's super fun. Ryan and Commonwealth Poultry just became kind of a special thing that kept growing, and Bonnie and Lindsay kept hearing all about it, and they kept saying, when are the rest of us going to get a piece of the action, because he's so wonderful. But anyway, the collaboration is really where it's at, and it's what gives us all the courage. I find it's just fun to co-invest and to be in it together, you know, and you're going to win some and you're going to lose some, but it's really, that's the piece that draws us in.
Yeah, to echo that, Eleanor, I mean, it is about the team, and I think that investing in other kind of companies too, not just the ones that are involved in food, you see a tendency to lean towards that as well. But somehow there's a different feeling. I think that food just comes home to everyone. So rather than being in a tech business or a pharmaceutical development company, you have people that you're really focused on in those relationships, and that's been really rewarding.
Anyone want to speak to some of the fears related to dipping a toe or foot into this work?
I can talk a little bit about it, I guess. if you'd like me to talk now about that,
Sure.
I'm happy to. So I am not as involved as either Eleanor or June in the companies that I have been supporting. I kind of leapt off a cliff when I left the traditional financial markets because I was able to. I was able to get out of a trust that had been set up long ago, and it was invested in funds of funds, and I felt like there were a lot of, well, I call them ticks. I don't know if you'd like to accept that designation, but a lot of money that is sucked out of the economy, and it's not doing anything for anybody locally. And so, you know, moving to Maine and leaping off the cliff, I just decided that I was going to go as far as I could into impact investing. And the other part of my experience is that I'm an environmentalist, so I do a lot of work with Sierra Club. I have been doing other work in terms of water conservation, and I see a real intersection between regenerative agriculture and dealing with environmental impacts. And so for me, and I mean, there's another adder that I've recently found out, that not only are we losing $6 billion a year out of the Maine economy for fossil fuel expenditures, but we are also losing more than that. 90% of our food budget in the state of Maine is going outside of the state. And we have, you know, the potential to be, you know, we were the breadbasket of New England. We have the potential to be the breadbasket again. And so for me, you know, I just felt that it was really important to invest in the local economy to move Maine forward. We are lucky to have the resources that we have, and in, you know, but not only in the fact that we do have water, we have some clean water. We could get a lot cleaner water. And I think if we work towards, you know, small farming businesses that really care about their, you know, what they're doing, and food suppliers, et cetera, I think that we are going to end up with a much more sustainable economy in the state. So I don't know if that is informative. The question, you know, I was queried was, you know, why would we want to make these kinds of investments? And, you know, why aren't there more people investing? And I think partly the fear is about losing money. And long ago, I heard that, you know, really over a long period of time, the best you can expect for, and certainly in farming, you cannot expect for more than a 3% annual rate of return. You know, 3% is plenty. And, you know, for large investors. And it seems that especially, you know, when you look at what just happened to the fossil fuel investment, investing in local farms is actually a much more sustainable long-term investment. So I think it's scary, but I also think it's extremely exciting. I did participate in the moo milk investment, and one could think of it as a failure. My uncle was a dairy farmer. I, you know, grew up in Delaware, and, you know, had, you know, learned some about farming as a child. That business leapt in when those dairies were, you know, going to go under, and it was a really scary ride, and it ended up, you know, not being able to succeed. But I think that it kept those families going for a long period of time, and I feel like that had so many positive outcomes that I cannot think of it as a failure. So I guess that's, you know, that it is scary, but it's also community support that, you know, makes me feel better that I was able to do that. So anyway.
Could you let people know who you are, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Becky Bartovics. I live on North Haven Island, and I have been a longtime Sierra Club and executive committee member, and I'm also run a small farm myself with sheep and chickens. I recently got some pigs. They're doing a great job digging up the buckthorn in my woods, and I'm supposed to get bees this week. So I'm kind of busy, I'm always busy, so I could not possibly take over the same level that Eleanor is and June has, but I'm really thrilled to have the opportunity to work with Bonnie and Lindsay. And Lindsay and I have done quite a lot of work together, and it's really exciting to be able to, participate in Maine Grains. And how would I have even found Maine Grains if I hadn't, met Bonnie and Lindsay? So, and this, Marada I've already known, but it's a very exciting thing to see what is happening with us kind of returning to local food supply. So anyway, and I'll take any questions, but I'm not an expert, so.
I'm going to jump in. Oh, no. Oh, so I've already talked. So where's somebody else's hand up? Okay, if nobody else is talking. Hi, Becky. I've pressed apples at her lovely farm. It's beautiful. Could we, I really admire all you, the people who have done this as an investor. Could we also talk about those of us who are doing this as a consumer and educating? We're among like-minded people here. But so for instance, if you're in North Haven, someone needs something from a hardware store, they tend to go to Home Depot because there's a perception it's the cheapest, even though there is the option of Ace Hardware, which is a locally owned franchise. So it's just a tricky area about educating people about keeping those dollars locally. And those are really great statistics. I wrote down that's amazing, $6 billion of fossil fuel just in Maine. And just about brainstorming how, without being people that people in pickup trucks hate because we're so smug, how do we spread our joy of supporting local even when it costs more?
I can personally say that I've actually done some checking about this. And for instance, I actually don't use Amazon. I'm a boycotter of one, but somebody on, North Haven Facebook page, was, saying how great it was to be able to get their blue jeans or whatever from Amazon. And I decided to do a little bit of checking on what the prices were. And, Amazon does not get you the lowest prices. And, the local grocery store has diapers, which is what I was really checking because I knew that there were a lot of babies on the island. So I thought, well, I'll check and see what they are. And really, you're going to pay 4 times as much through Amazon. But there's a perception, it's like the company store, the traditional company store, that, if you go to one of those places, they're going to provide you with the cheapest price. And so I just pass it on. I don't know how we can, persuade otherwise, but I can say that on this island, everyone has done the same thing as, has happened the rest of Maine. We put our produce on the local Facebook page and people are buying it. We recently had a sale of raised vegetables and plant material that, we donated to the local, that many of us donated to the local early childhood program. And we knocked the socks off of anything we'd raised ever before. So that, people, I think, are beginning to realize that locally raised things produce, help the local economy. And I think we just have to keep talking about it. I don't think we can, we can't, you can lead a horse to water, but they have to find it out for themselves. So anyway.
Thanks, Becky. I'd like to get some perspectives from Amber as another entrepreneur. And if you have questions and comments that didn't get addressed right now, there will be a little time afterwards. But I'm aware that, as has happened with this topic before, time goes quickly with this exchange. So I'd like to just give you a flavor of a number of perspectives, particularly with the people that I invited. So Amber, are you ready to share?
Yes, thanks for having me, Bonnie, and thanks to all of you. There's so many familiar faces here that have been a part of my life in the last decade or more, and I appreciate you all. Bonnie asked me to address kind of our experience with the varied responses we've seen from investors since the inception of Maine Grains. So I'm Amber, I'm in Skowhegan. I'm running Maine Grains, which is a grist mill that was started to solve some of the infrastructure challenges that we realized existed in the state for processing locally grown grains for human consumption. And I think we wrote our business plan in 2008, so shortly thereafter, Slow Money was getting its start, and I think we were an early infrastructure business that stood to support farmers upstream and value-added producers and entrepreneurs downstream, so that investments in our business were seen as a great way to get some bang for your buck. But along this path, I can say that we've seen a lot of different ways that people have chosen to engage with us to help fuel the process. And I think of money like energy. You know, not only have we put other people's money to work, but I put my own money to work in fueling this idea and fueling this business over the years, and it's taken lots of different forms. In the early stages, and in my own naive state of starting a business, I honestly was reading a lot of grant RFPs, feeling like the project that we set up to start here in Skowhegan would hit all of these philanthropic notes, right? We were trying to solve missing infrastructure in the state of Maine. We were doing so in Skowhegan, where there were high rates of unemployment and hunger and poverty. We were renovating a downtown dilapidated building in order to do this and contributing to downtown revitalization. So, so with Slow Money's help and a lot of your help, we found some early tools, and we created some tools that helped me partner with nonprofit economic development agencies in my community for pass-through grants. So we got to work writing grants and accepting charitable contributions that could pass through to the project-related work that was mission-aligned. That was some of the first ways that I financed the initial stages of the project. And then kind of, again, looking at Slow Money Maine as a think tank, if you will, we put together some patient loan models in the early stages, where by patients, it took the form of no payback for the first several years or low interest rates. And as our business grew, we really reached a critical point several years in where we realized we needed to make more equipment investments than we originally thought in order to scale the business to a profitable place and make sure that we could get to break even and beyond. And so we pivoted, not to overuse that word, kind of halfway through our journey so far, to convert our business from an LLC and convert to a C Corp that allowed us to sell some of the equity of the company to raise more funds. Our investors took the form of some of the early patient investors that chose to convert their loans to equity. We've seen investors who have written off their loans in order to support us in growing and thriving. We've seen philanthropic foundations become equity investors in our company and join the team in helping create the financing that we needed. To some of your points that have been made already, I have investors that I've still never met who just choose not to be visible or actively involved, but felt very good about planting their money with our business. And I have other investors that have been with me as a mentor and members of my board through the duration here. So it really is varied, and I think we all have gifts to give and share, and for some people that's money, that's time, or the Slow Money Network has really presented to me a group of people that are not only willing to make capital available, but make connections available and provide their mentoring and expertise. And I see things I mean, just the early Fair Food Network TA grants that the Slow Money Maine Network helped me to benefit from have turned into a model for other technical assistance grants in Maine that are now fueling more gifting of funds to entrepreneurs. So the Maine Grain Alliance is now giving TA grants with charitable funds that it raises. Our local Main Street Skowhegan program has adopted the exact model, and they're now gifting TA grant monies to hyper-local entrepreneurs here in Skowhegan to do it. It really wasn't that long ago. If you think about 10 years ago, when I built the business, at least in my town and regionally, was not really recognized as an economic.
Whoops, first glitch.
Maybe Amber should turn off her video and then she would come in. We could hear her. If she can hear.
Pause for a second because you all are freezing and maybe, am I back?
You are.
I'm back, okay. My computer tells me I have an unstable connection in this jail cell here, so. Our building is a renovated jail, for those of you that haven't been here. The walls are thick. So anyway, I see the work of this group having ripple effects that I think are wonderful in my own community and much farther beyond.
Thanks, Amber, even with interruptions. Comments, questions? Just a logistical detail. Kari, are you there? Kari?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking we should just keep going with the exchange and not take time to go into breakout groups and bring people back. Is that okay?
I think that's wonderful. If we want to take maybe 3 minutes at the end, we could put people in breakout rooms so that those people who haven't had a chance to speak might share something.
Yes.
Usually do that at the end.
Great.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so comments and questions with Amber's.
Amber, my name is Tom Hazlett, and I would love to learn a little bit more about what was going through your mind in 2008. And for context, I'm currently investing in a farm to produce shellfish and ocean vegetables, and I'm thinking of doubling down to invest in what I'm going to call a hub, which is to say a processing place for cold storage, wet storage, and packaging. And I'm just curious, when you set out to build Maine Grains in 2008 or even before then, did you have a clear picture of how you were going to fit into the intersection between the producers of grains and the consumers of grains? Or did you have, shall we say, an attitude of if I build it, they will come?
Did we lose her?
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can now.
Okay, I just don't have video, but I heard the question, and if you can hear me, I'll just proceed to answer. So in 2008, the context of our project was that I had been volunteering to grow our farmers market here in Skowhegan for a number of years, and grains were missing from that conversation. And a grassroots group of us began to ask why no grains? Why not grains? And we started an event called the Kneading Conference, KNEAD, that brought together farmers and bakers and millers to figure out how to revive Maine's grain economies so that we could have local grains. And I started visiting any mill that I could go see. I didn't initially think it was going to be me to start the business, but what I saw all across the Northeast were just what I would consider to be fragile operations. There were very determined folks on farms with a lot of ingenuity figuring out how to mill some grains, but not enough to supply communities with food, and certainly not distributed to a region. So I wanted to compare what was needed in Maine with how we actually distribute grains in this country, and I ended up at a course in Kansas to see what very large flour milling looks like. And I went to a week-long intro course that showed me how big flour milling is and what the focus of our national flour milling infrastructure is. And it's enormous in scale, as you can imagine. I learned there that only 0.1% of what we're growing and milling in the United States is certified organic. I learned that Maine didn't even show up as a grain producing state because our quantities were too negligible. And the entire focus of flour production was really white flour, which we know to be declining in What I learned there was that
Amber, we can't hear you. So you might want to turn off your video. Kari had suggested that earlier. And then just have your voice.
I hope she'll talk about her cafe and her pizza too, because.
Okay, hold on one sec.
Talk about your pizza and your cafe.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So in any event, did you hear about the trip to Kansas?
I don't think so. We heard about white flour.
Okay, yeah, so you got that. So
Amber, you still haven't gotten rid of the video, which I think is what has been suggested a couple of times, so that we just hear you with audio, which may strengthen your presentation.
Perfect. How's that?
Let's see if it works.
Okay. Another thing was just that in this country, there are no resources to go formally learn how to make stone milled flour. And that was the focus of our interest here in the infrastructure here in Maine, because it produces a better flavored flour that is great for natural fermentation baking. And yet the National Grains Program in Kansas had not a single resource on how to produce stone milled flour. So in any event, it allowed me to see that there were real opportunities to create infrastructure that was suitable to our scale here in Maine. And that if no one else is formally learning how to become sellers in this, we would learn this by figuring it out and by finding others who could share with us. So that gave us hope and inspiration for trying to develop the infrastructure.
This is Marada, and as a sidebar, with Crown of Maine, I have a pretty good sense of distribution and the distribution landscape and how cold storage factors into that. But that's not the whole story. I also ran a processing company called Northern Girl, where we definitely believed if we built it, then business would naturally, obviously, flow to this amazing business that we were creating in a rural part of Maine, working with local farmers. And that wasn't how the story went. And today's not the day to share all of that story, but I'd be happy to share more with you about that and the infrastructure challenges, the location, the capital. And yeah, I'd be happy to share that with you if you want to follow up with me off the call. So I've done it both ways, and learned some hard lessons along the way in good company, I would say, with some of the folks on this call who were there with me the whole time.
I have a question for anyone more in the investment space. Given the current state of the world and the pandemic and crisis, I mean, knowing that a lot of investments are based on what people look into the future and projections, and knowing that while we're seeing a lot of success of some food businesses, there's also so much uncertainty that exists in the future. And I guess, yeah, I would wonder for investors that are in the room, like, how do you kind of navigate this period of time, and what does that mean for you? And, you know, Amber was just talking about 2008, which obviously was a different downturn in the economy, and we're expecting obviously to be even greater. And yeah, just wondering what people are looking forward to in this, and what approaches people might be taking. And just introduce myself. I'm Jonah Furtick-Bird with the Cooperative Development Institute, and work a lot with different co-ops in the food system. So,
Thanks, Jonah.
I could speak for the angel investing. Food is a hard sell. It does, you know, even though, yes, there is Stonyfield yogurt and there's Ben & Jerry's, but besides those, there's a general perception that food doesn't scale well, doesn't scale like the way software scales. So I think for traditional investor, without an education component and without the impact piece, it's a food in general is a pretty tough sell. And in this COVID environment, yeah, it's not going to help any. Just one opinion.
I know there's a major effort in Waldo County Bounty that is trying to connect growers with people in need, and I know that there are some efforts going on in Portland and other places to more like a philanthropic event than as an investment, but to support the restaurants, to employ people to buy the food from the farmers, to provide the food for food insecure people. So there's some discussion about it around the state. I don't think we would ever think that investing in food is going to be something that will give you a 10% rate of return. So I think you need investors who believe that the food system is really important to invest in and are willing to take a longer look at what's in their portfolios. So that's what I think.
One thing, I do feel like the world of impact investing is definitely growing. I mean, there is greater and greater awareness about, Wall Street and its tremendous shortcomings and volatility. And I look at, a company that I'm invested with, or an asset manager, Trillium, a mission-based investment company based in Boston. And their portfolio has grown tremendously in recent years. And the election of Donald Trump, not to get political, had the impact of having their phone just ring off the hook. So I feel like, climate change was really a driver for that. But I do feel like we're in another moment where, first of all, there's a huge relationship between climate change and food, right? But then there's also a huge relationship between food security and pandemics, which we're seeing, and the way our food system has gotten so vertically integrated and consolidated has become a huge risk factor. And we're hearing all those horror stories, right? We're hearing about all the animals that are being euthanized because they can't, feed them another week, and the processing place is shut down due to COVID-19. So we could be in another moment where investors start wanting to connect the dots again. And I'm hoping that food is going to benefit, and investing in local food is going to benefit. And we're definitely seeing across the spectrum in Maine. I mean, there are companies that, Marada spoke to the growth of her company. Maine Grains, your mail order business, Amber, I know has taken off tremendously. And same with the chicken businesses. People who are able to pivot are seeing huge sales growth. So I'm hoping that that's going to encourage investors from a financial perspective, but I also hope that, again, people are connecting the dots, and this is not just about money, but about resiliency.
I would say, go ahead, Amber, sorry.
Yeah, if you can hear me, I was just going to add,
I can't hear Amber. Can anyone else?
Nope. I think the prison needs some updates.
Well, I wanted to say one time that I was actually on an investor call with folks in San Francisco. I don't think any of them are on this call, so I can share this bit with you guys. And I had the unstable internet connection, and I couldn't help but think that maybe Maine's rural internet was not helping us to raise investment funds because it didn't lend credibility to us as entrepreneurs that we couldn't maintain the internet video connections with our funders. And that, we talk a lot generally about improving that kind of infrastructure in Maine, but I would say that became acutely real to me in that moment, that I would not be able to convince a San Francisco investor to put money in my company if I couldn't maintain a video conference with them from my house in South China, Maine. And maybe that's not a problem that people in Portland have, but it definitely is real for the rest of us. And then the other reason I've heard people don't want to invest, that I've struggled to reconcile in my own mind, because I see the reality of it. And this is germane to the reason we're all on this call today, is because we believe in supporting slow money and slow food. But I have heard that I wouldn't be able to make a return on the investment fast enough, that even my best projections wouldn't bring the company above break even in a period of time that would be satisfactory, or wouldn't return on even if the company was above break even, it wouldn't return on the capital or allow the capital to exit in a time frame that worked for them. And so, yeah, go ahead. And so I guess that sort of the speed of capital and the pace of building out these businesses, which does take my lifetime and possibly that kid's lifetime too, that's a real factor. And I wondered if some of the investors who, not to be ageist, but may have stood that test of time, have anything to share about just how do we reconcile that longer than our lifetime perspective on investing in the food system. The dairy farm that I live on, the owner, I said, do you guys make any money dairy farming? I'm always curious, and you guys do really high quality organic Jersey milk. And he said, I finally figured it out. It took me about 40 years to figure this out, but one generation uses all the wisdom they acquire in the length of time they spend on the farm to provide enough of a runway for the next generation to fumble their way through to making it to break even to keep the dairy farm going. And he said it's an intergenerational proposition to have a sustainable family farm. And this gentleman doesn't have any children. So I thought that was just like an incredibly insightful piece of wisdom and germane to capital in a food system where we work on cycles of a year is a short period of time for food to change. So.
Good point.
Marada, I won't attempt to answer the breadth of your question, but I would observe that financial return is entirely driven by the time horizon for the return of capital on your investment, whereas the non-financial returns, which are only beginning to be quantified and understood, typically have a longer duration, a longer time horizon to realize. And so shifting the mindset of the owners of capital to consider the non-financial returns in the context of time is a very, very interesting and a broader conversation than we have time for this afternoon.
Yeah, that's
But-
super
but I appreciate your
interesting. I didn't
question.
really think about that. Yeah.
It's one we should have.
May I suggest another conversation? I've heard this briefly touched on. My concern is that when you're investing, you're looking to get a return on your investment. And that drives selling product out of Maine. And so there's how do you balance being successful in your investing in local food and providing local food to the locals? And the one example that is uppermost in my mind was the example with local Eating Local Food Coalition back in 1912. And Amanda Beal can speak to this better than I. She knows the history much better than I do. But the point being, as soon as we had a website that told people where the local farms were, it was being used by purchasing agents in Massachusetts to buy product to be resold in Massachusetts. And so, yes, you want to be successful, but how can we do this in a way that also builds food security for ourselves and our locality?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point.
I'm suggesting that as a topic that's worthy of.
Hi, Bonnie, it's Nate.
Well, go ahead, Nate.
Just a quick, this is Nate Berry from the Sandy River Charitable Foundation, and I've had this discussion with Marada as well as with Amber. We have, foundations who are trying to invest in this space have special challenges in that we're required to pay out 5%, basically have 5% cash going out the door on all of our investments. You may have heard that there's a call to up that to 10%. And as we become more and more invested in our mission space, that 10% requirement, really is not, even 5% is not a reasonable return or a weight that we can foist onto our investments. So we are somewhat stuck in a space where, we hope we are, liquidating, non-mission related investments to essentially subsidize. But over the course of, say, 10 years that you might expect a investment to last, we will have to pay out 50% of that investment in cash. So there's some regulatory issues that make it somewhat challenging for institutions such as private foundations to make this all work.
All right, I'm going to need to step in as a facilitator, honoring the time that we did establish for this gathering, and also noting, as I did in our first gathering on this topic, that people were ready to continue the conversation beyond the time that we had scheduled. So again, as we said in the beginning, please let us know if this topic has more interest in an ongoing way to all of you or any of you, and we will shape our planning virtually as long as we need to before we get back to seeing each other, to keep this conversation going and to build on the awareness that has come at this time and not lose the momentum that has built at this point. I'm totally grateful to all of you for being here, for bringing your perspectives and bringing the validation of our work as pioneers in this sector. It is clear that the work needs to go on in different ways and in some of the same ways, and that we all need to work together and widen the circle of people that are interested enough to explore possibilities for themselves. So please keep the conversations going in your separate circles, and we look forward to continuing this conversation in ways that we can bring us together, and be in touch with us along the way.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Thanks, Bonnie. Good to see you.
Thanks, Kari. Thank you, Kari.
Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
for listening.
Thank you.